You may have come across Mehdi Hasan before. He's a political commentator who feigns to have an objective interest in politics, but really is an aggressive, leftist attack dog who's always searching for a gotcha moment to prove everyone who doesn't agree with him is some racist full of hatred. However, that belies the anger he's got in his own heart, if you ask me. Here he is talking to middle-of-the-road academic Matt Goodwin, who's become increasingly critical of mass immigration and state multiculturalism in the modern UK. Goodwin is trying to defend himself on some rational humanist grounds here, but Mehdi is desperate to show that he's evil and racist.
You wrote about the guy accused of murdering these 3 little girls, that he was the son of immigrants from Rwanda. Why is it relevant that the suspect is the British son of Rwandan immigrants?
He ultimately was a product of migration. He was a second-generation migrant. We know from a lot of research that cultural practices, traditions, values, different ways of life tend to pass down from first to second, third generation. We know he came from a very conflict-ridden society, Rwanda.
We have no idea what his motivation is. The police don't know. What do you know that they know?
Now, I did warn you that Mehdi Hasan isn't interested in an open, objective conversation. He just wants to yell at you, bite at everything you say to enforce his woke agenda. And he knows that Goodwin can't answer that question right now because Axel Ruda-Kabada, the accused Southport murderer, is at this point, as I say, accused. Henceforth, you can't comment on a present case. Yet the real question here that's bubbling under the surface is someone who's a second-generation migrant fundamentally British?
I think going out and doing a mass stabbing and going on a
mass stabbing is very British. Sorry to break it to you. A lot of British people do stabbings and killings.
Do they? Since when have mass stabbings been very British? Does he mean the Afro-Caribbean community down in London? And then we come back to the same fundamental problem. What do we mean by British?
This kid was a Brit. Is a Brit. Or is he not a Brit to you?
It depends how you define national identity.
Wow. So am I not a Brit?
No, I think it's, do you respect the country that you live in and do you follow the rule of law?
So it's a conditional citizenship?
It's not conditional.
You just said it depends on whether you respect the country you live in. For somebody who doesn't want to judge people on group identities, why are you bringing up the parents of this kid? Do you have any evidence?
We have lots of evidence.
You do?
Social science has lots of evidence that the second, third generation migrants
are?
Bring over certain cultural habits, traits, practices.
Murder.
No, but for example, second generation British Muslims, for example, will express higher levels of religiosity.
He wasn't Muslim. That's part of the problem.
No, but the underlying point...
No, because you're dodging the point here. This guy was the son of Rwandan immigrants, and you cannot explain to this audience why you thought it was relevant to bring that up.
Now again, you can't have an honest conversation with someone like Mehdi Hasan. He's clearly a bad faith actor. The Muslim analogy Goodwin was using was clearly an analogy, and he obviously ignores that. But to give the devil his due, Hasan does have a point in exposing the lukewarm liberal conservatism of Matt Goodwin. So while yes, Mehdi Hasan is just a liberal leftist attack dog for the globalist system, at least he has a position. His position is anybody who turns up in Britain and gets an indefinite leave to remain or a passport is British. Now that may seem very wacky to many, but at least it's a position. Whereas Matt Goodwin seems very conflicted on what British identity is. He seems to be frightened to say that one can be civically British, i.e. you have a passport and definite leave to remain and so on, and you can be ethnically and culturally British. Now Goodwin may not want to say anything because he could lose his job in the academic world if he says something the leftists don't like, but it is pointing towards something that's developing in British politics in the moment. That centrist liberal conservatism is an increasingly hard position to hold. To want to just focus on the economy and classical liberalism doesn't really wash in this era of identity. After all, we've had decades now of this judge someone by the content of their character line. However, leftists haven't paid any attention to that at all. They've gone into hyperdrive with identity politics. This has meant that many people on the right have started to notice, I don't want to leave my identity to the leftists who are just going to lie about me and demean me at every single turn. On top of that, many people are noticing the different, how would you say, cultural practices that we're welcoming in from every different corner of the earth.
It's obviously about immigration. He is a product of immigration.
That had nothing to do with it as far as we
know.
know. We don't, but you're the one making the claim, not me.
I'm saying in the context of that week, there are lots of questions to ask about to what extent was this guy integrated into wider society?
Sweeping statements.
What's going on in Britain is what's going on in every Western nation now. And we're going to have to decide, is someone British simply because they land here and get a passport, or does an actual British identity have cultural and ethnic meaning? As you can see from actors like Mehdi Hasan, they're extremely aggressive and they're not budging one bit. There's no talking to them or rationalising with them. And as you can see with Matt Goodwin, who's doing everything to not be accused of being a racist, he's going to be accused of being a racist anyway. This is the choice we have. total capitulation to leftist ideology, or to say there is a legitimate dimension to being British which we'd like to keep alive if you don't mind. And just remember, while attack dogs like Mehdi Hasan are more than happy to make out that you're some evil bigot, in their private time make statements like this.
We know that keeping the moral high ground is key. Once we lose the moral high ground, we are no different from the rest of the non-Muslims, from the rest of those human beings who live their lives as animals, bending any rule to fulfill any desire.
Charming, isn't it? More than happy to take that moral high ground with us, but when our backs are turned, we're animals to him, apparently. Anyway, this looks like one of the big themes of the 21st century political scene to me, and I don't think that soft centrism is strong enough to answer some of these complicated questions. These are my thoughts, however, do let me know what you think down below. Do consider subscribing to the channel.